All right. This one here is called They Hate This Conversation. This one here is by Exo Speaks. I've done a few videos by him, not recently, but yeah, definitely a great content creator, sharp brother right there. Let's get into it, y'all. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button.
If slavery never happened, then you would be in a grass hut. Right? Well, we need reparations. Your reparations are that you get to live in America.
Man, shut up. This is why you can't give everybody a mic. They just get on there and say anything. It don't matter.
You're welcome.
You get to have the Christian religion.
That's
live
right.
better than your ancestors.
The greatest moment in history for any brown or black country is the moment that the white man's ships arrive on your shore.
See, that's that shit that I be telling y'all, man. White people, he's saying it out loud. And a lot of white people don't even realize that they think like this subconsciously, right? But it was instilled in them that they are the savior and the elite of the world. Everything is beneath them. There's God, then there's the white man, then there's everything else. And he really believes it, right? That's that Pope Alexander VI ideology right there. That is the discovery doctrine playing itself out right before our eyes, right? This shit was like this way before people started bringing Africans over here to this continent, bro. They've been feeling this way.
Every time reparations comes up, the conversation usually ends before it even starts. They get dismissive, defensive, or sarcastic and act like the idea of reparations is just ridiculous. What's interesting is how fast people shut this conversation down without ever really asking what reparations is or what it means. It's always framed like black people are asking for something extra instead of asking for something that was taken and never returned. So when people ask, do black people deserve reparations? What they're really asking is whether they're willing to acknowledge what was done, how long it lasted, and whether the damage was ever actually fixed. And for a lot of people, that conversation is uncomfortable because admitting that means admitting that what we have today didn't just happen naturally. It was shaped, it was enforced, and it benefited some people while harming others. A lot of people hear the word reparations and immediately imagine the government handing out checks to random black people with no explanation. And that image alone is enough to make people angry. And that's usually where the conversation stops. But reparations has never only meant cash payments. Historically, it's meant repair, compensation for harm, addressing damage that was intentionally caused and was never corrected.
What do you mean?
Hey, bro, listen, dog. Reparations can come in the form of all kind of stuff. It could come in the form of putting better schools in the black community with proper resources and funding. It could come in the money, the monetarily aspect, right? And the thing is this, reparations is needed and reparations is fair because other groups of people have gotten and received reparations. I remember there was a clip floating around of Charlie Kirk debating a black guy, and it was about reparations. He was like, Jews never got reparations. Yes, they did. They received reparations from Germany. They received land. They received money from all over the place, and they're still getting it to this day. And another thing is, even Germany received reparations for giving them reparations. That's what they don't want to tell people, man. Every other group of people have received some form of reparations. The Japanese, after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they got reparations. Even the Ford Motor Company was gave reparations to the Jews who were in concentration camps and forced to do hard labor that was, benefiting the Ford Motor Company. Like, see, when they talk about reparations, they really don't know no better, dog. They don't know that the indigenous people of like New Zealand received some reparations.
You want reparations? Our taxpayer dollars, which are mostly white people paying that, goes to, affordable housing, government programs, EBT, scholarships, DEI, you guys getting jobs.
DEI helps you the most, white lady. That's who DEI helped. And don't get it twisted. Every black person in this country who works a job pays taxes. We don't get out of not paying taxes. What are you talking about? It's our tax dollars too now.
Let's take all that, factor in the theft, factor in the crime, factor it in the murders, and the
question. If we're supposed to pay reparations, let's just say we are, how can you be sure that you descended from slaves if you don't even know who your dad is?
A debt is owed.
Y'all see this shit, huh? Y'all see it, huh? If you don't even know who your dad is, you can't even trace your lineage back to slavery. Okay, dummy. I know you're trying to be funny, But that man probably also has a mother, and I'm pretty sure she can trace her lineage. Oh, these people are so racist and stupid, and it proves the point that most of them are low IQ.
You owe a debt. You have to pay it.
These people are so stupid. They're lazy, entitled. They don't even care about the issues that they're complaining about. They just want free things. They want people to pay for their food, their housing, this, that, and the other thing. Why not $1 million kajillion dollars?
This is not a new concept. This country has done it before. Native tribes receive land and settlements. Japanese Americans receive reparations for internment camps. And other countries have paid reparations to Holocaust survivors. So the idea itself isn't ridiculous. It's only crazy when black people are the ones that are being discussed. That's when people suddenly start acting like history doesn't matter anymore. Well, also,
Hey, hold on, y'all. I'm about to show y'all a picture. This is out of a book about reparations. Can y'all see this? 1952, Germany gives $822 million to the Holocaust survivors. 1971, 1 billion plus 44 million acres of land, Alaska Native land settlement. 1980, 81 million to the Klamaths of Oregon. 1985, 105 million to the Lakota of South Dakota. 85, 12.3 million to the Seminoles of Florida. 31 million to the Chippewas of Wisconsin. Ottawas of Michigan got 32. Japanese Canadians received 230 million. 250,000 square miles of land was given to the Eskimos, not given back to them. 25 million to Jewish claims on Austria. 1.2 billion to Japanese Americans. So in other words, fuck black people, but everybody else can get their shit. Quick side note, at least once a day, I get a comment or an email asking, how do I do this YouTube thing? How do I make reaction videos? If you're interested in making money on YouTube and not just arguing in the comment sections, I run a private YouTube growth group. We do weekly calls, live channel audits, and you get to see how other creators are making money. Plus how I got this channel to where it's at 37,000 today when it only had 3,000 in October, and how I plan on making this channel go to 100K before the end of the year. Link in the description.
also gets ignored is that reparations doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all, because at the end of the day, different harms require different responses. The damage done to black communities was not just physical labor. It was financial, educational, and generational. So repairing that would naturally look layered, not something simple. And people forget, reparations isn't just about fixing something on paper. It's acknowledging what actually happened. When the harm gets denied or minimized, that damage doesn't just stop. It sticks with people mentally and socially, even when those policies are technically over. One of the biggest lies that people tell is that slavery was the only issue, and once it ended, everything reset. That's not what happened. Slavery transitioned into black codes, then into convict leasing, then into sharecropping, then into Jim Crow, then into redlining, then into exclusion from unions, housing programs, and business loans, then into...
Hey, look, and one more thing, I know I keep interrupting. They're still doing fucked up things to black people right now. Look up digital redlining. I found out a couple of months ago that I'm paying $90 more for the same internet that white folks is paying for on the other side of town. Definitely. If you live in New Orleans or, you know, in Louisiana, bruh, and you live in a predominantly black area, do yourself a favor. Go on Cox Cable or whoever's your internet provider and put a transfer service thing in there, right? So in other words, tell them you're moving to another house and pick a zip code where it's predominantly white. And I guarantee you, your shit gonna go down a lot. Fucked up. So black people who ain't got as much money as the white folks gotta pay twice for slower service and worse customer service. They still redlining us to this day. That's called digital redlining.
Over-policing, mass incarceration, environmental racism, etc., etc., etc. The list really does go on and on. Each stage blocked black people from building wealth, while white families were able to build it and pass it down. And that was not random. That was policy. So when someone says that was a long time ago, what they're really ignoring is how long that damage lasted and how recently some of it actually ended. You can't lock black people out of opportunities for generations, then act surprised when those effects don't disappear overnight. A lot of these systems overlap too. It wasn't one era ending clean and another one starting. Redlining existed while schools were still segregated. Mass incarceration grew right alongside housing discrimination. So the damage stacked. And even when certain policies were finally banned, the outcomes didn't just reverse overnight. Wealth, education, and access don't reset just because a law changes. Another argument people always bring up is, my family never owned slaves, so why should I be responsible?
So the taxpayer...
Wait. Another thing he gotta say is this too. Black people weren't allowed to put patents on inventions. And to the white man in the beginning of the video, be like, man, y'all would have been living in huts without us. Man, do you know how many inventions that black people created that you get the benefit from? And then think about all of the ones that we don't know who actually invented it, right? Because there's a law that they made back in 1850 something, right? The guy, his name was Stuart Holt, I want to say. Anyway, I could be getting his first name wrong, but his last name is Holt. Basically, he was a commissioner for the U.S. Patent Division, and he said black people can't get patents. If black people weren't inventing anything, why would we file for a patent? And why would you make a law that prohibits black people to obtain patents? Let that sit in your brain and marinate.
Are paying for something that they never did to people who never experienced said thing. The taxpayers who are going to have to be paying all these black people were never slave owners, and the black people that are going to be receiving these reparations were never slaves.
This lady had nothing to do with slavery. She's not affected with it whatsoever. She has the same opportunities that anyone's society does.
In the 1860 census,
listen.
at the very height.
Hey, at the end of the day, bro, they're hypocrites because most of y'all want illegals gone from this country, even though you haven't been affected by them personally, but you're still voting for them to get up out of here with the quickness. You ain't had a job taken from you. You wasn't physically assaulted by any of them. You weren't sexually assaulted. You wasn't murdered by them. None of that shit happened. You even like their culture. You like to eat their food and everything like that, but you still want them out of this country. In other words, you're hypocrites, man. Straight up.
Height of slavery, there were 393,975 slave owners in the U.S. That translates to about 1.2% of the population. The vast majority of American whites never owned any slaves.
Reparations isn't about personal guilt. It's collective benefit. You don't have to own slaves to benefit from a system that was built on slave labor and racial exclusion. Roads, land ownership, housing access, education, business opportunities, all of that stacks and compounds over time. At the same time, black families were legally locked out of those same systems. So the real question isn't whether someone personally did harm. It's whether the country profited while another group was intentionally held back. And the answer to that is yes. People accept collective benefit everywhere else. Nobody questions inherited wealth, legacy admissions, or family businesses passed down for generations. But when it comes to inherited disadvantage, now all of a sudden everybody wants to make it about personal responsibility. But ignoring collective benefit doesn't make it disappear. It just makes inequality look random instead of design. Whenever reparations comes up, someone always has the nerve to say, black people should just work harder and stop complaining. But what that ignores is that black people have been working hard this entire time. A lot of times harder than other people. We work harder without the same access to the reward. Hard work doesn't hit the same when you're denied loans, pushed into worse schools, paid less, over-policed, and locked out of wealth-building programs. So telling people to just work harder without acknowledging those barriers is not advice. It's just a way to dismiss the conversation without actually engaging with it. And it shifts responsibility away from the systems that cause the damage in the first place. And that mindset also assumes that effort alone determines outcomes, which isn't really how society actually works. It's tons of people that put in a lot of effort and that work really hard, but will never get to the same place as other people. Connections, timing, and capital matter just as much as effort, and those were systematically restricted. So when people repeat work harder without context, they're just signaling that they don't want to deal with the history behind it. A lot of the pushback from reparations comes from fear. Fear of losing something, fear of accountability, and fear of realizing that success was not purely earned. For some people, reparations feels like punishment, even though they were never personally targeted by the original injustice. But repairing damage isn't punishment, it's responsibility.
The point is, and another thing is too, man, the list of things that they was doing to niggas while we was trying to get up, right? You was putting us in the ghetto. You took away resources, you de-industrialize the neighborhood, you stop teaching people how to feed themselves in school because they had carpentry programs, they had auto shop, they had all this kind of stuff that a man could learn in school so that when he graduated, he could go get gainful employment. They put drugs in the neighborhood, right? They made access to guns really easy. They did all kind of stuff. They had laws saying that we couldn't move to that side of town. We couldn't rent this house. We couldn't own that house. It was just all kind of stuff. And then we went to the worst schools because our schools were not as good as white people's schools after segregation, because they basically defunded everything. So it's crazy, man. It really is crazy. And not only that, they say work harder when y'all had life easy. Like, all you have to say is like, damn, all right, cool. I saved this money. I work a job and I can go get a loan. It wasn't like that for black folks. Black people couldn't go get no loan if they lived in a certain zip code. Hey, man, the hypocrisy is crazy, man. And guess what? Slave owners receive reparations. Ain't that a slap in the face? The people who was doing the oppressing received the reparations, but the oppressed didn't.
Is that it's historically incoherent to pretend that America has some kind of special guilt for slavery, because when it comes down to it, guilt is shared by every country.
Yeah, obviously I really wish that didn't happen, but you forget, you guys sold yourselves. You weren't kidnapped off of your island from your huts. And 1% of early Americans owned slaves, including Black Americans. I know you're not used to your victim card being declined, but you have reached your limit. And genuinely, if you're so upset here, if we are so evil here, why don't you go back to Africa instead of complaining about us bringing you here so much?
Apparently history only matters when it's...
You know what's crazy? Black folks was here before y'all, and y'all be telling people to go back to Africa. Like, you really don't even know. You don't even have nowhere to go back to, honestly. That's the crazy part.
Convenient now. 1 to 2 million white Europeans were raped and enslaved and kidnapped by Barbary pirates. Right, then the question starts coming in, well, are you a direct descendant of what happened? Did it personally hurt your credit score? So now we care about qualifiers, right? But when it's time for modern day reparations, suddenly none of that matters.
This is the new pathetic angle that they're trying. Instead of just being like, you know what, we hear you guys, we understand, let's try to figure out a solution to make this fair for everybody. Let's try to right the wrongs of our ancestors. They're bringing out the Barbary slave trade and trying to compare it to the transatlantic slave trade. It's pathetic, man. And I'm gonna make a whole other video about this, so I don't want to get in too deep into it right now. The inequality that we see today didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was built, reinforced, and consistently protected over time. And if something was built, that means it can be repaired. And ignoring that doesn't make it disappear. It just allows the gap to keep growing. There's also a fear that once reparations are acknowledged, it opens the door to other uncomfortable questions about fairness in education, housing, and employment. Because once one lie falls apart, all of the other lies start to get real shaky. And most of the time when someone calls reparations unfair, what they're really saying is they're more worried about what they think that they might lose than the real harm that actually happened. At the end of the day, it's a selfish way of thinking. Reparations doesn't have to mean one big check sent to everybody. And in my personal opinion, it wouldn't make sense to do that. All that would do is eventually funnel the money right back into the same place that we didn't want it to be in the first place. It needs to stay within the community. It could look like targeted housing programs, our own institutions, debt relief, education funding, business grants, or direct investment into Black communities that were intentionally drained in the first place. The exact form matters less than the intention behind it. The goal is to address specific harm that was done that was never properly corrected.
I 100% agree that the United States owes the Black community reparations, and this is why. It's not about white people owing Black people. It's not about white people being punished for the sins of our ancestors. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's about white people standing in solidarity with a community that has suffered grave, egregious injustices at the hands of the United States government. But first, we must decenter ourselves in this conversation, alienate ourselves from our privilege, and hold the United States institutions and systems accountable for the wrongs that they never rectified. From slavery to Black codes, to convict leasing, to Jim Crow segregation, to anti-Black housing policies, to mass incarceration, we have never rectified our wrongs as a country.
A lot of people want to argue about the details before they ever agree on the principle. And that's how the conversation always gets stuck right where it's at. Before acknowledging responsibility is just a way to stall progress. Every repair process starts with admitting that damage was done in the first place. And without repair, inequality doesn't just fade away. It keeps reproducing itself no matter how much time passes. The real question is whether the country is willing to admit that harm was done intentionally, that the damage lasted for generations, and that simply ending the policy did not undo the consequences. Reparations isn't about handouts, it's about repair. And until that gets acknowledged honestly, this conversation will keep getting shut down before it actually even starts. Avoiding the conversation doesn't protect unity, it protects denial. And repair isn't only about the past, it's about the kind of future that people are willing to build once the conversation is actually on the table.
Hey, watching this video made me realize that, like, dog, every decade, there's literally something new that they created to hold black people back. You know, if we go back to 2008, people like Bank of America or Wells Fargo created ghetto loans. Companies like Cox Communications are charging black folks more for internet than they charging white folks, which is crazy to me, right? Every decade they doing something crazy. You had the Tuskegee syphilis experiments. You have mass incarceration. Like, name a decade where they weren't trying to do something that's going to be harmful to black people. You know, you had urban redevelopment, which is what James Baldwin infamously called Negro removal, right? They putting bridges and interstates through black neighborhoods, knocking down businesses, homes, and things of that nature. Like, every decade since we came here, they did something new. And guess what? Almost every decade, you see a group of people getting a handout other than black folks. So it's like, nah, this argument is a weak argument. And they pushing it like they doing something revolutionary. Y'all gotta chill, man. But anyways, guys, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Shout out to XO Speaks, man. I'm gonna get at y'all on the next one.